Welcome to the Driven to Engage podcast. Today, I have a special guest with us, Ed POBUR, who is the Senior Cadillac Advisor, or GM, at LaFontaine Cadillac in Michigan. And Ed, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Ed is a special guy in particular because 8 of 13 years out of the last 14, Ed has been the #1 Cadillac dealer in the country and has big plans to do the same here at his new dealership at LaFontaine. Ed, welcome to the Driven to Engage podcast.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Excellent. Thank you. There's a couple topics that we want to talk about, and one of those things is that race to the bottom. It's been a topic that's come up recently. I know Tom McCollum down in Dallas brought it up in a LinkedIn post this week, but he's not alone, right? I think we're all having that experience right now, and just kind of curious, just to kick off the conversation here, what you guys are experiencing and how you're managing that piece of it.
Well, I think the race to the bottom has a couple different anecdotes in there, right? I mean, you're going to have people, inventory, and basically those are your two volume things, right? So here at LaFontaine, which we have 34 dealerships, and all in Michigan, and I think that's where we're staying. I think I was just at a grand opening last night of a new Ford store up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we're growing, and we're one of the only dealer groups that are growing, and a lot of people are sitting on their hands right now because they just don't know what to do, right? They don't know sell, buy, sell, whatever they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Well, the arms race not the arms race, but the race to the bottom that you talk about is basically they're talking about the inventory world, right? In the inventory world, back 5-6 years ago, I could tell you that I had 600 Cadillacs on the ground, right? Today, I have less than 100.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. It's a little different game. So I equate what we do nowadays to Easter egg hunting, right?
Yeah.
So every day you got to make sure that, when you're only dealing with 100 cars or 150 cars, you got to make sure the car's available. You got to make sure that nobody's on the car and make sure it's what the customer wants, right? So back in the old days, we had to line up, you go, hey, take one of those 50 cars that I have out there and we'll make the deal and get it done right now. The Escalade world, the Lyric world, I mean, that's all crazy business, right? I mean, the business I speak of in the Escalade world, if you just think about this, and I have to admit to you that I'm the president of the LMA group for Cadillac in the Detroit area. So I'm in on a lot of different stuff, but so we bitch and moan about not getting cars, right? We're like, hey, we need more Escalades, And the guy told me, the guy from Cadillac, who's a friend of mine, he says, Ed, I got to explain to you something. I said, what's that? And he said, 19 and 20, you delivered X amount of cars. In 21, 22, 23, you delivered double the amount of cars that you've delivered in those two years.
Wow.
And he says, now here, take this. When's the last time you introduced a car and it was on a wait list for 3 years? And that's the estimate. And it's not slowing down. And which is a great thing for us, but it drives us nuts because a customer can't call you and say, I want a black Escalade. And you go, I got one. Here, come on in. We're going to do it. It's a 6-8 month ordeal. Right.
Yeah.
So what I think, and this is just, Ed POBUR's idea, right? But, the thing that I think is, I think that the manufacturer figured out that they can deliver us less cars and make more money. So I think the first blush of that was probably from Ford back in the beginning of COVID or middle of COVID or whenever that was. And, that they want to go on order basis only. Well, order basis is great, but instant satisfaction to a customer is not, right? So you're not really dealing with that anymore. Whereas a customer can come in and, I want that car. I can take it right now. Let's go. I mean, your window of opportunity on that is very small anymore, right?
Right.
Now, my different world. So in my store here, my new store that I'm at has GMC and Buick. So GMC has opened up the floodgates a little bit, right? Because they know they can't make the deal work without a lot of cars. So My GMC store probably has 300 cars in stock. The Buick store is probably in the same ballpark we are, 100, 150 or something like that. But it makes a big difference, right? It makes a difference of your everyday life of how you sell cars or how you've been selling cars for the last 30 or 40 years, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the way that I was taught and the way that this thing has worked for a long time is to have a lot of cars. The guys in my business that make hay are the guys that have the wherewithal that they could take a bunch of cars, right? And when you can't make that happen, when you can't make all those cars come at you at the same time, it hurts numerous different things. It hurts your rental car department, it hurts your sales department, hurts your service department, it hurts everybody.
Mm.
We're getting used to being squeezed a little bit. So we're kind of accepting it now. But the problem with it is still the end all that I started with, right? If I don't have 300 or 400 or 500 cars on the lot, I can't make this thing say 200 every month, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Chris, is as easy as I can say, everything I do comes down to a math problem. It's X number of cars in stock, X number of cars we're going to put in rental, X number of cars we're going to sell, and it just goes on from there. So it's a vicious circle when I don't have cars. So my rental department manager is screaming at us to give us more cars. My sales department is screaming at us to give us more rental cars to sell after they're done. But I can't put cars in without cars, right? So the big thing is inventory. And I think they're getting better at it. They're getting better and more back to normal, but it's a slow roll. It's not like the old days when they used to, I was the guy they used to call and they'd say, "Ed, they didn't take cars in your zone. I have 57 cars available." And every single time I said yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that made me the bigger dealer. And I had all the cars. And if somebody else wanted one of my cars, I got a good car back on trade. Right. So it was a win-win both ways. And then if I needed to, I could put them all in loaner service and then I could move on from there. But when you only have a certain amount of cars, that's when I think your guy's talking about is the race to the end, kind of. So
yeah, well, it's an interesting thing, right? Because travel rate, it's a thing, and inventory levels are typically based off of what that travel rate is. And I would imagine with this almost just-in-time order-based manufacturing that the manufacturers are going into now, they're still kind of going through a transition period of what is this going to look like? What are the rules of engagement? I would imagine there's probably going to be some missteps and a little bit of acid reflux for the dealers as that all gets communicated out. How are you experiencing that piece at this point?
Yeah, I mean, if back in the old days, and I hate to say that all the time, but back when, car business was the car business, right? I ordered zero many cars a year. I mean, for customers.
Right.
A lot, right?
Yeah.
So nowadays, I've got Escalade orders. I've got 200 short Escalade orders, 125 long ones, and probably 150 Lyric orders sitting in queue.
Wow.
So as crazy as that sounds, that's kind of the model that we're using now, right?
Yeah.
So I think they understand that we can sell more cars if we build more cars, right? And I think that and we do a lot of that to ourselves. So we'll jump on something and pull the curtain back as far back as I can pull it. And then I got to start all over again. Right. Yeah. So I think into what they're doing right now. And like you said, they're trying to figure out some ins and outs on this whole thing. How many cars is too many cars? How many cars is not enough cars? And then go on from there. But I'm here to tell you that we could take 300 cars right now today, 300 Cadillac,
right,
and another 2 or 3, 4, 500 GMC and Buicks, right?
Yeah.
So it's an age-old problem, and the problem, it doesn't just exist with GM, Cadillac, or GMC. It's Ford, it's Chrysler, it's Toyota, it's everybody. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know when they had that. I don't know when they had that big summit that they decided all to do this.
Right.
But I wish I was part of it.
Well, I think the thing that they got drunk on as much as we got drunk on gross was, wait a minute, I don't have to do rebates and we don't have to do as much with subvented rates and everything else, right? So the fact of the matter is that's going to all kind of level back, maybe not as low as it used to be, but there's going to be some leveling off there. But it does there's a couple things as you're talking that I think will be an interesting topic for us to cover here, which is that human piece. So you brought up the two elements that are going to be most important, your staff and your inventory. Inventory we have less control over, because if we really manage that piece that we do have some control over, which is our staffing, and probably more appropriately is that customer experience. And now with you coming into your new role, I'd love to kind of hear how you're going about that transition to kind of, every organization's got a culture. Sure. And some of those cultures can change depending on which managers are running the store from one day to the next. I'm just curious how you experience that. I obviously got to be a little delicate with that because you've got a team that's working there, but how did you manage that piece of taking hold of a new store and trying to transition the culture to where you want to take it?
So that's a great question because I'm a huge culture guy, right? You know, and I believe that you can build within better than you can build from outside, right?
I love that. Yeah.
And the piece, and I explained that to you before in the last talk we had. But so in my original store, I had product specialists. So I would hire a college grad that probably, you know, isn't getting the right ins and outs out in the world, right? And I'd say, listen, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars. You're going to get overtime. You're going to get this. You're going to do this job for 1 year. And at the ninth month, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, you need to find your replacement because you're going to go on the floor at 12 months and you're going to be a salesman now. And now once they get to 12 months, the beautiful part about this whole situation is the product specialist comes in and they are raw. Nobody's seen raw, right? Never been in business, just popped in here. Somebody sent them to us, whatever, however it happened. So we have to teach them the culture, right? We have to teach them what we do. And, you know, you got to teach them what a car is all about, how to show a car, how to talk to a customer, how to be polite to a customer, how to be polite to your fellow employees, and how to do a great job, how to show up on time, how to leave at the right time, how to not just bug out on me when you know, whatever, right? So it's kind of they need to be attentive and they need to do what they're supposed to do for 12 months, right? By the time I get them out of 12 months, they know where the coffee is, they know where the cars are, they know how to get the cars to the prep, they know where the gas station is, they know where everything is about the car delivery, except for a car. Yeah. So that's when they come out at 12 months, mine and my sales manager's job to teach them how to do the business, how to sell a car, how to talk to a customer, how to listen to a customer. And that's that second one is a really big one, right? Listen to the customer. It's a monster deal, right?
Yeah.
So I've been very successful with that. And I can't take the full credit because somebody told me about this deal. And I said, you know what? I need it. Because I was sitting there in my old store and I was looking outside and I had 6 of my top guns out delivering cars. And it takes a little bit of time to deliver a car nowadays. You know, and you take a Cadillac Escalade and I mean, you could be in that car for an hour and a half, right? Because there's so much stuff and there's so many things to do. You got to do OnStar, you got to do this, you got to do that. You got to show them how to work everything, show them how to work the video, show them how their kids can work the video, show them how to do the navigation, show them how to do the super crew. I mean, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Things. But the beauty of my program is this kid or this young man or young woman can sit in a car for an hour and a half. It costs me $50, right? And if I have my guns in there, it could cost me, you know, $5,000, right? You know, because of the non-activity, right? So in my old store, I had 14 salespeople and 8 out of the 14 were one of those guys.
Right. Okay. And then 6 senior guys.
13, 14 years, right? So our new program here is we're under construction right now. We're building a brand new Cadillac store. We doubled the size. We're going to have 22 desks inside the dealership. We're going to fill every one of them. And we're going to require them to at least hit 10 cars a piece. And if you do the math, you know where the number's going, right? But it's just the math problem again, right? But I think the big issue with everything we do, right? I mean, this place that I'm at right now, we probably have 300 people working here. Okay, so it's a monster dealership. I have I have, we're always looking for techs. We're always looking for salespeople. We're always looking for everything. But the great thing about this place is a lot of people don't leave, right? So all I had to do when I came in here is piggyback on their culture, right?
Okay.
So, but the LaFontaines have been around for a lot of years. I've known Mike LaFontaine, the patriarch of the dealership, probably for 35 years. I've known Ryan, who is now basically running the show, probably known him for 30 years. So I've been because they've been on dealer council with me and they've been on everything with me. So I've known them. And I knew they had a great store. It's just that I had my own store, right? So they've come to me, hey, we can put something together. Well, I didn't need that at that time, right? Until I just did 6-8 months ago, right? So they welcomed me with open arms, and I welcomed them with open arms, right? Because we're going after the same goal. We're trying to be number one in the country, and there's no question about it. That's the only thing I think about every single day I wake up in the morning, right? This is the way I was taught. My father, Ed Sr., was the number one Cadillac salesman in the country for 17 straight years. So, So that's where I get it from.
So that's an interesting thing too, because we think that even as entrepreneurs or leaders in our store is the frustration that can come from not having that shared mindset with top to bottom throughout your organization. And I think probably people who've really are hitting their strides is when that gap between the top and bottom in the organization is as small as possible, right?
I think so 1,000,000%, Chris. I think the biggest thing in what we do is to be on the same level with our people, right? And they all know we make more money than them. They all know we're the leaders. They all know that we're the managers. They all know that we're going to make the decisions and everything. But you know what? I have found out that if you can just be 1/10% in their lives and know a little bit about their lives, when you can come up to one of your salespeople and ask them about their kid by name, it's powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Powerful. And when you can talk about their families and their what they do after work and be a part of it and know about your people, don't just assume they work for you. Right. I mean, I loved when I worked for guys that cared about us. Right. And when I was always the top guy and everything, but I cared about them too, right? I mean, I did what I was supposed to do, and if they needed help, I helped them, right? But in the world that I live in now, I'm helping 100 people at a time, right? I mean, I'm all over the place, and it's a kind of an interesting dynamic here because there's a GM that runs the whole place, right? So I had to move my cheese got moved a little bit, and when I adapted, and a great leader, I think, can adapt to change. And, if you want to get run over, then don't adapt.
Right.
So I had to adapt. I had to get myself straightened out here and know where, my parameters are and what I can do, what I can't do. But the one thing I will tell you about the LaFontaine group, it's a spectacular group, right? And I've worked for Sonic, I've worked for Ken Garf, and then some other outfits. And so I know all their cultures, and Ken Garf has a great culture too. Ken Garf is one of the best cultures I've ever worked for. This culture here is so family orientated that it's over the top, which is the way they want it to be, right? I mean, all the decisions are being made by the family. The patriarch, Mike, and Ryan and Kelly run the stores. And it's a dynamic that works really, really well, and they really love on their people. And that, I think, makes a huge difference. And they've had a lot of tenure here, obviously, with all the people that stay here and so forth.
Yeah.
And being involved in this place for 6 months, it's an unbelievable difference from the dealerships I've been at. The service department, the sales department, the down to delivery department. They have their own delivery department with like 12 drivers. One lady runs it. You give them the information. You never hear about it again. They come back, give you the paperwork. It's done.
Wow.
So it's done properly, and it's done the right way.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like in that regard, and I think that's an important thing for us now, is really getting our efficiencies down, right? The way of doing things 10 years ago, I think it doesn't fly. You mentioned something there with, with the LaFontaines and their culture and their values, that family was really high up there. And in family run organizations, that family tends to be in their core values in there. But a lot of times that family piece means their family and not the rest of them. And so, how have you experienced that as far as, do you feel like everybody in the organization feels like their families is valued as the family name on the building?
I really do. I really think it. I really think that it's been portrayed properly. I think that the three people at the top of the organization, which is the family, are very genuine. Now, we know you've been in the dealership business just like I have, and when you have 34 stores, you're running like a chicken with your head cut off, right?
Yeah,
And
no doubt.
I'll tell you what, I haven't seen a leader like Ryan LaFontaine do what he does, and he goes 150 miles a day and gets up at 4:30 in the morning, goes works out and does his thing, and he's just a machine, right? And he's been doing it, and he's the one doing all the buying stuff and doing it all, and I don't see a flaw in his game yet, but I've known him for a long time, so but it's spectacular what they do and how they treat their people, and it's not just this day or this day, it's all year long, right? I mean, It's a family deal. And, I didn't know that when I got here, right? I didn't know what they were all about because I never was infiltrated, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, they do things right. And do things right, you're gonna be at the top of the food chain. You're gonna be taking care of your customers and employees, and those people will send hordes of people to you, right? So that's how you build this thing, And I think this dealership is if I told you where this place is, it's on M59 in Highland, and it's in Highland in the day when they built this thing in 05 or 06 was a farmland.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So they basically built the culture out here, right? So they put this huge store, and if you ever looked on our website, it's a green store. So it's all solar built. Every green thing you can do, they did with this place.
Yeah.
And it is basically in the middle of, in order to go get food, you got to go 4 or 5 miles from here.
Oh, wow.
Right. So we have our own restaurant.
Yeah. How good's that?
Which is great. And then we feed our customer. If you come in for service from this place, you go right to the restaurant, you have breakfast, coffee, do your thing, and they come and get you. It's really done well, right? I mean, who could ever think that you could put a restaurant in a dealership and make it work, right?
Well, and that's that Midwest hospitality,
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, there's probably a restaurant down the street. Why not scoop that revenue?
It's crazy. It's crazy how good it works, right? I mean, you just want a coffee or something, right? It's all in the house. We take care of everything, right? You got breakfast, you have lunch, you have everything. If you're buying a car, you're in service, we got you. And we dice it up over the departments and we take care of it.
Yeah, but it kind of eliminates that objection to, oh, you know what, we're going to go get lunch and we'll get back to you.
It's exactly, it's crazy when I got here, right? I'm like, oh, and then I told the girls, I'm like, this is awesome, right? It's just awesome that they can do that, right? I mean, when you're dealing with the customer and you've got them here for a little while, why don't we get you some lunch while I'm figuring this all out, and then you come back and it works so good.
How good's that? Yeah,
it's so good. And then, I gotta tell you, with my service department, I've dealt with service departments before, obviously in my 40 years of career. And this place, I get this one guy, Rich LeMay, he did 250,000 in business.
Wow. No kidding.
That's more than dealerships do, right?
Right.
So I give him a customer and I say, hey, they need an oil change or they need this or whatever. I give them the name. I got to, reserve a car for the loaner car. They've got a driving business. They just go, that's all they do is service drives. They go back and forth with the houses. And so I go to him, I go like 2 days later, I go, hey, how's Mrs. Smith's car doing? She goes, That was back 2 days ago. We sent that back 2 days ago. And I'm like, oh, you didn't even tell me. He goes, do you want me to tell you?
Right.
Just go, no, if everything's good, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll find out about it if it's not.
The greatest thing about it, Chris, is that it takes that piece off my plate, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
I've been here for 6 months, and I don't even know if I've had a service complaint come in my office yet.
Mm.
So you've worked it. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And crazy good.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times in my last place that I worked, I'd have to walk through the service drive to get to my desk, and half the time I'd catch static on my way to the desk. So
that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's fantastic to have someone like that.
Well, they understand it, and I think they try to do it. I mean, obviously, this is the centerpiece for all their dealerships. This place here,
Yeah,
because it's guest and everything, and this is the one they started out with. But the just the whole concept, and I think from seeing the other stores that I've been at, I think culture is definitely in all the stores, and they have a great mission statement, and everybody in the place can recite it. And when you get buy-in like that, you're doing something good for your people and everything.
yeah. It's funny you say that, because one of the things we talk a lot about at Performance by Design is one, and I feel like, and you've been around the business obviously long enough, to a lot of times we print things on the walls, and we have a flywheel or whatever the case may be, and we refer to it, but it's one thing to have the words. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is the behaviors that define it, right? What are the actions? What does it look like?
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so I think you mentioned something interesting there with Ryan, right? Is that Ryan sounds like he role models that culture, that he's up every day, he's working out. You have to, if you're going to run a successful organization that size, if he's not role modeling it, then it falls apart, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And and speed of the leader, no matter what you do, right? I mean, it's, whether it's me, Ryan, or Paul Jordan, who's the GM of the whole place. I mean, great leaders. And I tell them right to their face, I mean, I don't hold any punches because I don't have to, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I tell Ryan all the time, I said, Ryan, you're freaking awesome, man. You get it, and you can deliver the message, and he's a fantastic speaker too. And I mean, you would have a ball with him.
Right.
Because he's 100 miles an hour, and he just loves to talk the talk. I mean, and he lives it,
Yeah.
And it's just great. And then Paul, who runs the whole store, is a fantastic leader too, right? And he understands the game. He's got all the ins and outs of the game. He's a great numbers guy. He's a great motivator, and he's a great speaker, right? I mean, you got to have all, and it's worked out really well, and it's a great culture to jump into, right?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing that you've touched on previously, right? Because, bringing in these kids from college and kind of grooming them, that in order to advance, there's some certain expectations that we have. The most important of which is that you're finding your replacement in order for you to advance to that next step.
And make them part of the problem, right? Make them part of the solution, right?
100%. But
Chris, by the time they get, excuse me, interrupted.
Yeah.
But by the time it gets to 9 months, they're chomping at the bit to get out, right?
Oh,
that's what you want.
You hope they are. You hope at 6 months they're peeling the paint off the walls, asking for. Yeah, I've got 3 guys lined up, boss. Like, what are we waiting on? But it's interesting because I've seen it. There's a certain point that you hit a ceiling in a dealership, and a lot of times we talk. There's this glass ceiling, but it doesn't matter who you are. It's that you're at a certain role. And I've seen this over and over again where a guy has hit that point. Ownership is going, okay, I'm opening another store. I got a seat. This guy looks like the guy. And then the GM's running interference in that whole deal, right? Because he doesn't want to lose his champion.
Well, we all have to understand we're selfish, right? I mean,
yeah.
So I mean, back in my old store, so when we opened the store up, it was in 2010, I think it was, or 2009 to whatever, it doesn't matter. But so when I got there, I ran everything, right? I mean, it was a new store. I didn't know what I had on my hands until I got going, right?
Yeah.
So I had to hire everybody in the store. And I didn't have anybody, right?
Yeah.
So we hired everybody, and then we started getting busy, right? So I'm doing all the deals. I've got a used car manager myself, 2 finance managers. We're busting out 150, 200 cars a month. New cars, another 150 used, right?
Yeah.
And how we did it, I have no idea, because it's crazy, right? So when I got to a point where I wanted to hire a sales manager to help me, I put it out to the staff. I said, if anybody wants to, be a sales manager, the time is now. I'm not saying you're going to get it, but I will interview you for the job. And my top guy came to me, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to make a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so I actually took me back a little bit, Chris. I was like, oh, I don't want to lose 25 cars a month.
Yeah. Right.
But in the retrospect, I probably gained cars, right? Because he's going to still sell his people when they come to him. He's going to just offer them to another salespeople or whatever.
Yep.
And it worked out where he was my sales manager from 2011 till 2000. What are we in? 13? So 12 or 2012. No, 22. Jesus. I missed 20 years there.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. 2022. So he was my sales manager for all those years, right?
Yeah.
And I tell him all the time, because he's one of my best players. I'm like, I never thought in my head you would be able to handle this, to be able to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And he'd be a great sales manager, and is still doing it. Not there, but somewhere else. But that, and then when I had to hire a GSM over the sales manager, between me and the sales manager, that was a whole nother deal too, right? I was like, do I need this or don't I need this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out you do, right? When you're as big of a store as I had, there's so many things to get done, right? I mean, there's and the thing, I hired a young lady, and she was a was spectacular what she did, but she did all the stuff like that we had to get done for General Motors. So I just put her on all that, and then you put your sales manager on something else, and then you handle the rest, right? Mm-hmm. So with help, you can get a lot more done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for a GM, if you're wanting really talented people, especially in this market where we're always looking for those people, is that, do you have that track record of hiring from within and promoting from within? Because I think, for those people that's important. And there's plenty of guys that, it's funny, like, I love the apprenticeship model, because it's grow at that, but
that's the best part.
Yeah. Well, it creates the culture that you want, because then I think the industry as a whole has really suffered for turnover. And being able to create that culture where we're promoting from within, and it's not just at the beginning, but taking you through a career in the business that goes beyond just selling a car. So yeah, I love hearing that.
Kind of what that's been when I talk to them when I hire them, right? I'm like, hey, look, I know I'm hiring you for the technology manager's job. That's not what my end game is here, right?
Right.
My end game for them is to become a salesperson.
Yeah.
Where you're a salesperson, that you can be a sales manager, a finance manager, or whatever, right? And not every one of them flipped into sales either. I flipped a few of them into service writers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're ever a salesperson too, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could just get the bullpen rolling like that, right? And you just keep it going, you keep it one in, one out, one in, one out. I mean, you get to 10 years and you got like 7 or 8 of them on your floor, and you're like, oh, it worked, right? And
I think that's where you saw that sustainability of success over time, is that, because 8 out of 13 years you're number one, but I guarantee you didn't drop to 300 on those years that you weren't number one, right? You were probably thereabouts.
I was number two.
Yeah. So it's sustained success over time. That's really, and I'm glad we got to that piece, because I think at the end of the day, when you establish a culture that sustains itself over time, those sustained successes with people, and I would imagine, do you recall what your turnover looked like?
My turnover at that store that I ran for Garf was the best in a set of about 74 dealerships.
No kidding. Yeah.
And here's fun. I had the best ratio female to male.
No kidding.
Yeah. And they didn't even know I did it, right, Chris? And I want to hire the best person for the position, right? I don't care if you're yellow, blue, black. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what female, male, whatever. I was taught 40 years ago when I worked for this guy. He's like, listen, when you become, he goes, you're going to be a manager someday. I said, how do you know that? He goes, I just know you are. And he was right, obviously. But he said, listen, hire people that are smarter than you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's hard to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, get to a point where you're hiring a guy and you're like, man, this dude is really on it, right? But that's great for you, right? And in my culture now with 34 dealerships and we're buying more, I mean, I'm going to lose pieces of the puzzle here because they're going to come after the best people, right? And they're going to make this guy, make GSM a GM. They're going to bring F&I guy, make it sales manager. I mean, the movement in 6 months that I've seen here is incredible, right?
Yeah.
It all works and it's all in the same fashion. And they put the pieces of the puzzle together. Does it always work? Hell no, it doesn't always work. We know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you put guys perfect for this spot and he ends up not being perfect, right? Well, you don't want to lose that guy because you nurtured him for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So you put your arm around the guy and you bring him into a different position, right? And then that's kind of what they do here. So, I mean, it's a great, people know that they have a chance, right?
Yeah.
And if me and you, if they said, listen, Ed and Chris, this is what you got to do. If you do this, you're going to get to be up here, right? You're going to get to move yourself up. Well, me and you are doing it in 3 seconds, right? Person, you got to put your arm around them and say, listen, if you do all your stuff right and you lead the board, you don't even have to lead the board. Just do it the right way, right? And pay attention to all the rules and regulations that we have to live by, because there's always rules and regulations. We can't get away from that. I mean, it can't be the wild, wild west anymore. Yeah. And, back in my day, 100 years ago, I mean, it was the wild, wild west, man. It was as crazy as it got, right? And like, how did I survive all that, right? But you do. You end up making it happen and everything else. But I mean, nowadays, I mean, we kind of talked about this too, but I mean, nowadays, I mean, the hardest thing you do in your work life in the dealership world is finding people, right? Getting the right people in the right positions to do what you ask them to do, right?
Yeah.
And if you can do that, and I mean, we're building our Cadillac team slow but sure.
On that piece where you're talking about it's almost this always be hiring. I know one of the best guys, it's funny, little story on this. One of the best guys I ever hired, we were in the finance office and this guy was just the most level, he said, he was like the number one Arrowhead water salesman on the West Coast and had been for like 15 years, but he had the most matter-of-fact way about him. But this guy was door knocking and was the number one and he says to me, I'll probably be one of your top salespeople the first month. And I just thought, looking at him like, really, you're going to be, I'll be damned if you didn't, and he blew the doors off. And it's funny because he was one of the only guys, because I was trying to do that apprenticeship. We didn't have that as a way of doing business at the store, but he was one of the guys that wanted to take that on and took a young gal under his arm, somebody that us as managers hadn't done well with. So when you talk about hiring someone better than yourself, luckily David Shields, he may listen to this. I'll attach him to the post. But he took Noemi under his arm, and Noemi became a star. And where the rest of us probably didn't invest the time that we should have in her. And so it's funny when you mistakenly hire the best people, and that's why I always say I'll always be hiring, in the sense that you can always have that conversation. You don't know who you're gonna meet.
I tell all my salespeople, I said, if you don't hand your card out 3 times a day, you haven't done your job.
Yeah.
I care if you go to the gas station, you go to the party store, you go to the grocery store, hand your card out. You know what? somebody might fall in and say, you know what, I need a car, right?
Right.
Cards are cheap, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and nowadays it's all electronic, but if you're out and about in the city, and everybody is,
Yeah.
hand them out. Be
Yeah.
proud of what you do, because obviously we've gotten a bad shake against car sales over the years. The used car salespeople, this stuff, blah blah blah. Well, you know what? Some of these guys in these places make more than doctors, lawyers, and
Yeah.
presidents.
Well, if they do it right, and to your point, if they take it as what it is, and that's what I love about the car business. I didn't go to college. I was a country kid who grew up pumping gas in his mom's grocery store at 10 years old. That was my experience in sales up to that point, and I love that this business still affords people that opportunity.
Well, it's the greatest. I tell people all the time. I said, listen, it's the greatest business that I know, right? I mean, you can. I mean, how many businesses have 5 different businesses in one, right?
Right. Yeah.
But and you got new cars, you got used cars, you got finance, you got parts, you got body shop, you got service, you got 6, and then you got the office, right?
Yeah.
And it's intricate, right? I mean, we've all worked in these places, and it's a machine. When you get these things rolling, I mean, this place here is going to do they're going to make $1 million this month, right?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so you worked in stores, you know what that number is. And to do that, obviously you got to have a lot of things going the right way, right?
Mm.
And we're going to probably do 400 new cars this month with the hell, GMC's booming right now. Cadillac will probably do 100, 120, something like that. And then, our used car department is it's a 300 car a month used car department.
Mm.
So it's a monster store. And, but it's like run like a smaller store. And it's so beautiful that it works that way. And everybody knows everything. They don't hide anything from anybody. So all the managers know how to look up, you can look up your doc, you can look up this, you can look up this, you can see where you're at, you can see where you're not, where you're messing up. And Paul, the GM of the whole thing, he teaches like that, right? So he says, who doesn't know, right? And let's face it, not all of us dive into financial statements and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So let me show you where you can find this, right?
Mm.
And it's up to the room, right? I mean, and it's a powerful thing to let people in on stuff, right?
Mm.
Then get them on your team, and that's how you get them on your team.
Well, if you were to leave our audience with one thing as it relates to building teams and that sort of thing, what would you share with us here to kind of conclude our conversation? Because I feel like we could go for hours, but I've seen your eyes kind of pivot off to your right there a couple of times. So I know you got business coming in the store, but how would you leave us here today?
I would say the one thing, and I've been telling my 3 kids this for their whole lives, right? I'd say it's 100% easier being a nice person than it is being the opposite, right?
Mm.
And if you do that throughout your life, and that's not with just customers, but that's with the fellow employees, your family, everything else, right? Try to be a great person. Try to be a great person every day of your life, right? And try to make somebody better every day of your life, right? Try to put your arm around somebody and tell them you're doing a great job. Or if they're not doing a great job, say, look, this is how we fix that, right? Don't beat on people. People can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
It's a crazy time, because back in the day when I learned to car, I used to get my dad used to crack me on the back of the head. He'd go, hey, straighten up, right?
Yeah. Oh man, it was rough. It was
so hard done, but it's a wake up.
Yeah.
And that's how, right? I mean, and back when I started, it wasn't go on the computer and go to Google, right? It was go on the yellow pages and find it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's funny, but I mean, that's what it was. And back then there was no phones, no computers, no, CRMs, none of that. My CRM was a 3x5 card collection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Didn't they have like the Red Book or something like that?
Yeah.
It was like a padded vinyl thing or something.
Yeah. We up here, we did all 3x5 cards, all the places I've been at.
Yeah.
And I sold more cars out of the 3x5 file than you've ever seen, right? Because they were chronologically in there, and you could say, okay, these folks are from this month, and I can get them back in, and blah 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 blah. So,
Yeah.
so it gives you a nice order, and but it keeps all your customers in front of you. And I tell people a lot of times, I'm like, listen, what at Christmas time, do you get a lot of Christmas cards? And they're like, oh yeah, I get a lot of Christmas cards. I said, how many Thanksgiving cards do you get? And they're like, well, I don't get any Thanksgiving cards. I said, if you send somebody a Thanksgiving card, do you think that's a powerful thing? And they said, you know what? You're right. Easter, giving all that off-brand stuff. It's just stuff that nobody else does, right? It just be the guy that can do the stuff that nobody else does, right?
Yeah.
If you can differentiate yourself from the herd and sell more cars.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great mantra for everything that we do. I mean, your Cadillacs are the same as everybody else's. What's different is the experience you give them at LaFontaine, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris, I've built my whole career on that, right? I built everything I do to take care of the customer. I was taught 45 years ago, customer, 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 customer. Don't ever forget it. And I've never had it. And people come to me now. I mean, I have thousands of customers now, and they, when I was off for a little while between this, they're like, I went to another dealership. It was horrible.
Yeah.
So I'm like, good. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, right?
Right.
So that's I hang my hat on, and I try to do the right thing by everybody. Every day. Obviously, we can't do it all the time, but I mean, we try. And I have great support system here that I can do that every day, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can't do it. I can make a phone call, and they'll make it happen.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic organization, and I couldn't have landed at a better place.
Well, yeah, it seems like it. I'm looking forward to getting up in that part of the world, and when I do, I definitely want to stop by and meet you in person. Ed, I really appreciate your time today. I'm sure people will appreciate a listen with our podcast, and thanks to you and your team at LaFontaine.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you. Have a great day, and send me a copy, please.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Awesome, man.